Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Stuff I Heard podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peak. And today happens to be the 7th of June, 2020. This is episode 231. And sorry I'm doing this on a Sunday and not a Friday or a Saturday, but sometimes you just got to live life. You know what I mean? I have an obligation to myself, and I hold myself accountable for doing two a week. I know I don't have to, but I'm sort of obsessed. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what drives me. So anyway, let's get into it. I had to go to work down in Charleston recently, and if you guys are paying attention to the news at all, you know that there were some riots that went on downtown, and they damaged a lot of the businesses and stuff like that. And I didn't go down there for Monday or Tuesday because it had happened the previous weekend, but I was down there Thursday and Friday. We didn't actually work in the downtown area. I went with the driver down to Edisto, and then we did the south end of Charleston near Ashley River Road and Savannah Highway. I asked the driver, I said, the guy that works down there, what did he describe? Has he seen anything that looks chaotic or whatever? And he was like, oh, yeah, it looked like everything down there is just destroyed. And I was like, really? He goes, oh, it's really bad. And I get it. And I'm upset by everything that happened also. And I also think that we're not making anything better by doing that. I don't know what the right answer is. I do like the fact that this weekend I've looked on people's social media and there are a lot of peaceful protests, a large number of people coming together of different races and ethnicities and people marching together and being vocal and letting their voices be heard and that kind of thing. I'm disappointed in our president for not paying attention to this kind of thing, and he's glazing over the issue and trying to use it as a jumping off point to try to win presidency again. Of course, Joe Biden's doing the same thing. I don't like either candidate. I really don't. They're both opportunistic and they're both super egocentric, and both of them are out of touch with the people. They're completely out of touch with us, with the voters, with the people they're supposed to represent. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that the president is it's the weirdest popularity contest that as soon as you get in that position, you're blamed for everything. So why would you even want to do it, except for the fact that you're an egomaniac? The only difference is someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who says that she doesn't want to be president, but she feels like she has a calling. And that's why she's a congresswoman. She's like, I didn't want to run for Congress, but I thought, well, someone needs to do the job. Why not me? And I sort of feel that way. Like, there are things in my life where I've come across controversy and challenges, and I've thought to myself, someone needs to do this. Why not me? It's sort of an advantage of my life. I realize that a lot of people have it a lot harder than I do, and I've been exceptionally blessed. God has blessed me over and over again, and I know that like some people don't believe in God and that kind of thing, and there was a time when I denied that as well. But at a certain point in your life, you have to realize that, or not realize, that's the wrong word, because it makes other people feel like their point isn't valid. I have faith. Okay. I have faith that things will work out. I have faith that I'm not in control of this. I have faith that even when things look awful, good things happen. With that faith, sometimes when you're weathering a storm, sometimes it's hard to see the good that's going to come out of it in the future. And there are times where good doesn't happen when it should. And that's where patience comes in. And it's very difficult to have patience, especially when you're upset and angry. And it makes my heart hurt to see people in the situation that they are. And the fact that, a lot of people are simply judged by the way they look. And that's wrong. I mean, it's so disheartening. But anyway, I want to talk about the fact that it is opening up a conversation. It is allowing a dialogue that we haven't had in a long time. This is sort of a dialogue that happened with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in the NFL, and everyone ridiculed him and talked bad about him. I even did it on this podcast. I was like, I don't agree with it. There's a different way to do this. And, one of the things that this got me thinking about was maybe his taking a knee was the best thing. I didn't feel that way at the time, but maybe it was the conversation that got started. Maybe George Floyd horrifically dying like he did by that guy, that police officer that totally overstepped his bounds. Maybe that tragedy will help change things. Maybe he didn't die for nothing. And I've said this, I'm going to keep saying George Floyd's name until some change happens. Maybe George Floyd didn't die for nothing. Maybe something positive will come from this. Does that mean some negative comes too? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the nature of things. But I'm hopeful. I got to be. I have faith. But anyway, not to pivot too sharply, but the reason I didn't do a podcast yesterday was I was hanging out with some friends. Two guys. Both guys have been on this podcast. Kelvin Bryant, he runs a new you counseling center here in Florence, South Carolina. And I got a text message. I didn't realize my phone was not on the thing. Anyway, Kelvin Bryant, he's been on this podcast. He talked about, counseling and seeking help if you're, dealing with any kind of psychological issue. You need to talk to a professional, and that everybody has problems. We all have problems, even if you're a big, bad, burly man and you think you're all big and strong and you have this persona that you're not supposed to be vulnerable and you're not supposed to have problems. And he's like, listen, we all face adversity and we all face difficult times. And he's like, and I'm a counselor and I face difficult times, and there's times where I need to talk to someone. So he was with us, as well as Danny Shaw. Danny was on the podcast with Ian and Mike, the police officers from Ohio. And the three of us got together basically because our wives were out of town, and we were like, hey, let's go hang out at the pool and let's talk. And like, we didn't have music going. We had some food. Like, I grilled some wings and we had snacks to eat and we had a few beers but we talked more than anything. We talked about what we're all going through and how what we were doing, our conversation was the thing that more people need to be doing. That just having the conversation and getting to know people really well and realizing how much you have in common with people and how much empathy that each other can have for one another, and how much, once you learn about a person, you really care about that person. And I felt love. I felt love for these men. I felt love in the conversation. I felt like afterwards, and it wasn't the beer, it was conversation. I felt that it was a moment where we could all be vulnerable. We could all talk about the things that we're afraid of, things that we're trying to do with our lives, things that we want, things that we hope for, and the challenges that come with it, and the vulnerability of saying, I don't have the answers, but I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm trying to share with other people what I know. And that's all we can do. I encourage everybody to do that. I mean, if more people did that, we wouldn't have what we see right now. We wouldn't have this level of violence, and we wouldn't have this level of anarchy and hate and frustration and death. This needs to happen more often. These kinds of conversations need to happen more often. It was more important for me to spend the day doing that than it was to talk to you guys. And I know that sounds wrong because I had a commitment, and I know there's a lot of people that kind of depend on these things to keep going. But let's face it, there's a lot of podcasts. You guys are probably only listening to me part-time anyway. I know I can go a little bit long-winded, but speaking of which, long-winded, I just watched Joe Rogan's 5-hour podcast yesterday, last evening, with the Honey Band. Long-winded. I say 5 hours. It was 4 hours and 44 minutes, but still, that's pretty long. So anyway, I know that I can be that way sometimes, and I know that people have a choice of what they can listen to. And thank you for listening, by the way. I don't know if I say it enough, but thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting this podcast. Without your support, I wouldn't be doing it. And I'm hopeful that it matters to some people. I'm hopeful that it gives some people some insight into some cool things. And Maybe it's just a way for you to stay awake while you're driving down the road. Maybe it's something working in a warehouse and you're just bored and you're like, let's listen to this guy. He's kind of interesting or funny or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the demographic. I just know that I see numbers move across the screen and I'm like, wow, people are listening. Cool. Thank you. I mean, you know, my goal, like I've been saying all along, is I want to build community. Okay. I'm taking a page right out of Joe Rogan's book. He keeps having guests on and they talk. And towards the end of it, you learn a lot about the person. Same thing can happen without a podcast. Okay. You just have a conversation with people and be honest and be vulnerable and be forthcoming and just have a conversation. And a lot of people don't understand how to have conversations. They don't understand that there's a time when you talk and a time when you listen, and you have to listen. I had a boss one time tell me, he said, there's a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much. Sometimes you get the information, you don't give information. And of course, he was talking about in sales, blah, blah, blah. And he was right when it comes to sales. But I've always found that being self-effacing and honest with people appreciate that. And they're willing to be the same with you. So listen, I know it's a skill set that most people don't have. All I'm saying is make an effort. I mean, it will enrich your life. It will enrich the lives of the people around you. If you feel like you are lost or alone, it will grow your community and you won't feel as lost and alone, because we're not. Listen, we're all put on this earth for a purpose. Whether you realize it or not, it's so that we can help each other. I've always said it. You're given this life. What you do with it is your own. You can choose to support one another or hurt one another. If you hurt one another, then, I mean, there's really bad consequences. If you support one another, only good things can happen, right? So let's support one another more often. So with that being said, let me talk about the famous Joe Rogan podcast here that happened recently. It was episode 1486. Like I said, 4 hours and 44 minutes. The Honey Honey Band. Okay. So the Honey Honey Band, I first heard back in 2012. I'd forgotten when it was, but Joe mentioned it on the podcast. Young Jamie looked it up on the computer. And sure enough, that was 8 years ago that Joe was at a event, and I guess he heard them play and was really blown away and invited them to be on the podcast after they hung out for a while. They came on the podcast and it was a fun hang then. And they've been on, God, I don't even know, maybe 8 times, 9 times. I don't know. I know Suzanne's been on there with Gary Clark Jr. pretty recently. I talked about that episode. It's a really fun hang. They they're drinking whiskey. They finish a bottle while they're doing the podcast. There's 4 of them in there. They smoke weed, and in about 2 hours and 30 minutes into it, they do mushrooms. Allegedly, we're supposed to say that because it's not legal in California. But anyway, nothing crazy happened. It's a good conversation. It was fun. It was very enlightening. It was very full of love and honesty and vulnerability and everything that you would want from a conversation between friends. They came in with their instruments and they played music within the first, 20 minutes. They played a couple of songs, and then they played like 3 or 4 more songs later on, and it was great. Suzanne's got an incredible voice. So does Ben. The Honey Honey Band is made up of 2 members, Suzanne Santo and Ben Jaffe. And I don't know how many albums they have out, but I've bought a lot of their music over the years. I really enjoy them. She has a solo project, and so does he. I bought hers. I didn't like his as much. I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't connect with it as much. But Suzanne has a solo project that was called Ruby Red, I think was the name of that album. I bought that. I listen to it all the time. It's great. She sings. She plays guitar, mandolin, banjo, piano. I don't know what other instrument, but violin. I mean, it's crazy the amount of instruments she plays. And I think on the Joe Rogan podcast, she brings the violin, a couple of guitars. I mean, she's very talented. I think Ben plays drums and guitar and sings. And they're great together. They harmonize well together. They create great music together. And they do on this. They even sing a really cool Bonnie Raitt cover. I was like, wow, what a cool tune. But yeah, very fun hang, very fun to listen to. I actually linked it and put it on Facebook. I know that most people look at that and go 4 hours, and I'm not watching that, and they'll just immediately click off. It was one of the better things that I've seen done because it was the conversations that we're all having, the conversations about COVID, the conversations about George Floyd, the conversations about what's this coming to, what's going to be the cure, what's going to be the thing that gets us through this, what's the conversations we should be having, all of these things in a very long format, but all of these things. And speaking of long formats, my buddy Greg has a podcast, 5 and 40, and he did episode number 10. And in his subjects, one of the subjects he starts at the end talking about, I've been sticking to this idea of doing 5 subjects in 40 minutes, but, I'm listening to other podcasts now and becoming a fan. And the more I listen to them, the more I hear people talk about when this one guy did a 30-minute podcast, a lot of people were like, I wish it was longer. So he did an hour. And then as he was doing an hour podcast, people were writing in saying, I wish it was longer. And he's like, here's the question. Like, do I just go for 40 minutes or do I go longer? So as a fan and a supporter of my buddy Greg in the 5 and 40 podcast, I will say that it doesn't matter. My dad and I had this conversation when it came to YouTube videos. He said that he thought that people's attention span was very short and you should make really small YouTube videos that are about 3 minutes long. This sort of reminds me of the conversation that happened in the movie about Queen. What's the name of it? What's the name of it? We Will Rock You. Not that. What's the name of it? You guys know it's on HBO right now. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, in there, they came up with the song Bohemian Rhapsody, which is like a 6-minute song. And they took it to their record exec, which in the movie is played by Mike Myers. And he's like, that's a terrible idea. Everybody wants 3-minute songs. You can't do a 6-minute song. It'll never play. It'll never be a hit. You're never going to be able to do this. Turns out to be their biggest hit. A 6-minute rock opera song. Crazy idea, right? Do what you love and people will come to you. Joe Rogan does 3-hour podcasts. It's not hurting him any. So my dad's putting out these 3-minute videos over and over and over on YouTube. And we got friends on YouTube that are putting out videos that are over an hour long. And it's like, you're looking at their trends and you're going, but people are watching them. They're watching them because they're engaged. You have to make people engaged in order to keep them on. So if you just have 3 hours of dead space, no one's going to watch that. You got to keep people interested. So like Casey Neistat says, you're building a story. You have to have a beginning, an arc, and an end. You got to land the plane at the end. They do that on everything that you watch, whether you realize it or not. Every show that you watch, every sermon, every whatever. Second Chance Church. They always talk at the end about, all right, I'm getting ready to land the plane. And they talk about bringing the story to a close. I'm going to wrap everything up. Here's the ending. Here's the little bow at the end. The Kaiser Sose moment of Usual Suspects. Here's the thing you've been waiting for. So to Greg, I say, do whatever you want. If you want to do 40 minutes, do 40 minutes. If you want to go over, who cares? No one's going to hold you to that. And if they do, you just go right past them. You don't listen to that. I mean, literally, don't listen to it. I get negative comments all the time on my YouTube page. It's hard not to pay attention to it because it's the thing. A lot of times it's the thing you're also thinking. People write in and go, I can't believe you're such an idiot. I'm like, yeah, I know, right? I can't believe I got away with that too. I can't believe that worked or that didn't work. Sometimes I will literally make a video on YouTube about a mistake that I made, and I'll make the video and saying, here's my mistake. And people write me after that and go, I can't believe you did that. You're such an idiot. And I'm like, that was kind of the point of the video. Like, I'm sharing with you my mistake. And I'm also saying, this is what I would have done or whatever. This is a total error. Don't do this. I made a video one time just because I was curious. I made a video because I was like, I had a broken faucet in my wife's bathroom. We have a his and her sink. My wife's sink. I had a broken faucet on her sink. The hot handle was dripping, and I realized that the little thing inside was loose, and I needed to replace it. So I did research on YouTube. I couldn't find anything that showed me how to replace this thing inside of a Moen faucet. And then I finally found something, and it says it has a cartridge on the inside, but you got to have a special tool to get it out. And I thought, well, I mean, maybe I could figure out a way out around that. And I tried. and I couldn't get it out. So I went to several stores and I bought several tools that supposedly would do it. I ended up having to take them back because none of them fit. They were all made for different size things than I had. And I got frustrated. And so I made a video and I literally asked a question. Does anybody know what to do? That was the title of it was, how do I fix this? Or something like that. How do I fix this Moen faucet? Or something like that. Something to that level. And so I went on a search and I started asking questions and I got really frustrated. And at a certain point, my wife goes, hey, we bought this from this place. There's a place in Florence here called PD with Nelson. She goes, go by there and just see if maybe they have one that's like it and ask him if he knows what to do. And I was like, they're not going to have it. This thing's been in the house for so long. And she's like, just go check. So I went there and I asked the guy, we started looking at it and he's like, I got one of those in the showroom. He goes, they're Moen. They back everything. He goes, all you got to do is call their customer service number, 1-800-BUY-MOEN. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, they can help you. And I called and they sent me the part and the tool to fix it for free. And I was so happy with it. I came home and I made another video about, here's how you fix it. I've got it. And I made a video about how to replace it. And I did the whole thing. No one watches the video about how I fixed it. It's got literally just, maybe 1,000 views. The question one, and I actually had to link both videos together so people could click on the other link, but they don't. They only watch the video about the question. And the question one's got a ridiculous amount of views, hundreds of thousands of views. I'm like, what? What? Why? I even titled the other one, here's how you fix blah, blah. But whatever. Nobody pays attention to that. And I get all the ones on the question one. Dude, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you just made a video about how not to fix it. And I'm like, does no one read? Does no one pay attention? No one reads. No one pays attention. No one cares. So do what you want to do. Here, I guess that was my whole point. That's my landing the plane of this moment. Do what you want to do. Come up with your own content. Make whatever. Who knows what your audience is? I don't know what my audience is. I'm amazed at you guys listening. And I'm amazed that you guys watch me on YouTube. And I'm so thankful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you didn't do this, I'd have to probably go get therapy from Kelvin. In a way, me talking out loud like this is my therapy. I mean, it is. Having conversations with people on a regular basis is a way for me to sort of get out of my stupid brain all the things I'm thinking about. Sometimes it's just me wanting to share the information that I've learned. And I learn a lot of information. I'm always questioning. I'm always curious. And that's what I want. I want to have conversations with people who are curious and excited and passionate about things. Tell me about the thing you're into. I mean, come on, whatever it is. Right now, my buddy's super into this. My buddy Greg is into this thing of distilling. Has a wooden cask barrel that he's mixing bourbons in. It's cured and it's way outside of my knowledge base, but I'm like, cool. That's really cool. Teach me about it. Tell me about it. I find it fascinating. I don't drink that stuff, but I find it fascinating. Danny Shaw, what we hung out with the other night, he's super into Jeeps. He loves Jeeps, loves off-roading. Loves it. I'm not into it, but I dig the fact that he's into it. I'm all about it. I'm like, cool, man. Good for you. That's great. Why not? Ron White was in here. Ron White's a tattoo artist. He's super into tattoos and tattoo artistry and stuff like that. I have some tattoos, all of them he's done, coincidentally. But, it's not my life. It's not my world. But it's really cool to know people that is a world. See, my point is, this thing behind me, this picture, this is an example, okay? Your life can be any one of these colors in this picture. Now, granted, there's only 5, 6 colors in this picture. Your life could be just blue or just orange or just white. But there's a whole lot of colors in the world. There's a whole lot of people in the world. When you get to know those people and know what they're into and experience life with them, it can enrich your life and make it a beautiful picture. That's the point. That's the whole point I'm trying to get to. People are so quick to push each other away because they don't look like them, talk like them, act like them. Have a conversation with them. You'll be surprised what you have in common. So anyway, moving on. I do want to talk about the fact that I watched the UFC fight last night, UFC 250. Thank you, Josh Treadaway. And was really amazed at some brutal knockouts. There were a few brutal knockouts last night that was really impressive. So lightning quick, so aggressive. I mean, holy cow. Um, but the big fight of the night, the final fight of the night, was Amanda Nunez defending her title against Felicia Spencer. And listen, Amanda dominated that fight for 5 rounds. And Felicia had a cut on her forehead. She was bleeding all over the place. And even the announcers were like, I think they're going to call this fight. I think they're going to call this fight. They should call this fight. And they didn't. And she kept fighting through, and she was very resilient, and she fought as hard as she could. And she didn't win. But at the end of it, you thought, okay. I mean, that was the heart of a champion. That was the heart of a fighter that deserved to be in that ring with Amanda Nunez. She didn't have the skill set, which, I mean, Joe Rogan was one of the announcers, and he talked about often. He said she has the desire and she has the resiliency. She just doesn't have the tools to beat Amanda. And Amanda Nunez is a champion. She holds the belt in 2 different weight classes. She is a dominant person in this industry. I mean, there's never been anyone as dominant as her. She is the champ. So shout out to Amanda Nunez. Good for you. That was really awesome. The podcast, I'm sure that if Joe wasn't doing that, he would have done one of his Fight Companion podcasts, and you would have heard a lot of the guys just going, oh, over and over again, because there was a lot of like really big knockouts. So if you watch that, I hope you enjoyed it. Let's also talk about a show that I watched. Again, thank you, Josh Hathaway, called The Last Dance. The Last Dance was on ESPN. It was about Michael Jordan and the reign of the Bulls during the 90s. And we talked about this before on different podcasts. One of the conversations that we had was about the fact that Treadaway's watched it all and Alex had watched it all, but Greg and I hadn't. Greg, I don't think I'd seen any of it. I'd watched 2 episodes at the time. Well, I got to finish the rest today. I didn't have nothing going on today, kind of getting ready for work tomorrow. And I watched the other 8 episodes, and it was great. It was great remembering all of the stuff that was going on during that time and realizing that, you know, this was sort of my youth. Jordan's reign in the early 90s was basically my high school time. And then, you know, the year and a half or whatever that he was out of basketball playing baseball after his father died. I was in the Marine Corps, and I mean, I really didn't have time to pay attention to what was going on. But then his reemergence back into the NBA, I had gotten to a point where I could then spend time to watch games again, and I was enjoying it. And I really got to enjoy, especially the 96, 97, 98 season. I don't know what chain of events happened to where I could do that. I think it was because I was living on the West Coast and I could watch games early and I still had time to go to bed at night. I think if I lived on the East Coast, it'd been a lot harder. But being on the West Coast, it was a luxury because they would have games that were considered in prime time for the East Coast. West Coast, it'd be like, you come home from work, hey, the game's on. Cool. I mean, as soon as you come home from work, it's on. You're like, right on, man, let's watch this. And then it went off and it was like regular primetime TV after that. And I was like, okay. But it was a joy to watch. There's a scene after Jordan's father passes away and he comes back to play in the NBA. And he went, spoiler alert, if you don't know this already, in 96, they win the championship on Father's Day. And he cried. And then here was this guy who was a dominant, brutal force in the whole basketball industry, who everybody respected, everybody feared, who was showing you his raw emotion of just breaking down and not being able to control himself in the moment, being sad and having a right to be sad. His dad had been there every step of his success in his life. His dad was brutally murdered. It was horrible, but watching Jordan overcome all those obstacles and win on Father's Day and sort of cathartically being able to win as a thank you to his dad. And he talks about the fact that he has faith and he's like, I believe that dad was right there with me the whole time. And listen, I don't know if you believe in that kind of stuff or not. I knew it was coming. I lived it as a fan, watched it, cried when it happened with him. And I watched it again in my living room and cried again watching it because it touched me again. I knew it was coming and I still cried. So there, take that. I get the same way every time I watch Finding Nemo. Whenever the dad remembers his son as a little tiny egg, and he's like, "My boy, my precious boy." And he's holding, I know, I'm a big girl. Whatever, get over it. Laugh all you want. You all have your thing. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up early, as Greg says. I do some short ones. I do some long ones. This is a short one. I think I'm at 30-ish minutes. I don't even know how long. The sad part about recording this on Zoom is I don't have a counter, and I never think about start a counter. So I'm just guessing here. I think it's around 30 minutes. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope that you're being safe. I am asking for special prayers for my stepdad right now. He is in the hospital. He's had shortness of breath. They tested him. They've seen that he has pneumonia in his left lung. They're keeping him for observation. They've done COVID tests. 2 tests have come back negative, but they're keeping him for observation because they don't know what's going on. So I'm asking prayers for him. I hope that everything's okay. And thank you to everybody who's listening. Thank you to everybody who's been a part of this. Build your community. Be part of this. Like if you want to be on the podcast and talk about something, let me know. Like seriously, don't be a coward. You can do it. I'll hold your hand. It'll be fine. Anyway, thank you. If you don't hear it anywhere else, I love you and I appreciate you. And please remember to rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends the podcast. And as always, cue the cow.
So I want you guys to give me more likes. Give me more